Svihlik and Shooter back with another episode of The War Room, powered by Draft HQ. I am Shooter Hunt, Vice President of Scouting at Prep Baseball, joined by DJ Svihlik, a senior correspondent to Draft HQ. DJ, today we're talking about a hot button topic, prep right-handed arms.
Yeah, I think one of the most misunderstood groups in the entire draft. You hear people all the time, risky, I don't want to do that. Some teams completely don't do that. It's just very taboo. They're just going to go into bats. Sometimes for good reasons, they're good at drafting bats, but they will completely eliminate groups of players in a system where there's not a lot of true major league players coming out of any given draft. And when we say true major league players, we're talking about players that are 2 WAR value and above, players that are going to give you regular status as a position player, or so they're willing to completely eliminate groups of players, which is just wild to me that they'd be willing to do that. And this right-handed class is terribly misunderstood.
It's interesting you say that, because when we go through our ranking process, especially at the high school level, almost never, I don't know if we have done it at all at the prep level, put a right-handed arm as the #1 player in the country. It just doesn't happen. Position players have more value for us and the teams as well. So we just kind of hedge onto that side, but it doesn't mean that there's not talent in the right-handed arm category. And for the teams you're talking about, it doesn't mean that their scouts aren't carrying a radar gun to the game.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think, again, we need to talk about why they're misunderstood. Why are people so fearful of them? Is it a player development thing? Do we not trust our player development systems that they're able to handle these very talented players? Because to a man or woman out scouting, these players are exciting to scout. How many players do you see on the trail this year that are going to go 93 to 96?
Oh, it gets more and more every year.
More and more every year. It's fun to watch that. But sometimes it's more fun to watch it than it is to pick it. That happens a lot in scouting. Fun to scout it, hard to actually make the pick. And that's what's happening here. And the numbers bear it out.
Now, is it an injury issue, like especially right now, hot button issue? Oh, Tommy John, everybody's getting hurt, right? And I guess I'm a big believer in, like, it's going to happen at some point to everyone. So does it really matter that, oh, this guy's going to blow out, don't like his mechanics? Like, shoot, everybody's going to blow out. So I don't know what you're saying there exactly, but at some point, somebody's going to start. Somebody's going to get paid 9 figures to be a starter in the big leagues. So there must be value somewhere.
That's right. I think you're right on that. And the health thing's an interesting case, because the one thing the college game does among a lot of things, it vets out a lot of different stuff. You went to Tulane, I went to Illinois. We got pitchers all over the place. Savage, and we got Chase Burns, who's at Wake Forest. And the college game does a lot of things. It vets out a lot of stuff. What that stuff is, we talk about. One of them is this health issue. A player in college goes, he gets bigger, he gets stronger, and he shows you that he can take the ball once a week, not every 5th day, but once a week. He can log those innings, and he develops his pitchability. He develops his ability to control the baseball. We're talking about high-level arms. So you then have the comfort. It eliminates a lot of the questions for these scouting directors out there when they're going to pull a guy off the board. And that question, as much as we want to project on the high school player, those questions are unanswered. It's specific to health. We just don't know. As it turns out, the college guys end up getting hurt, just like high school guys getting hurt. You make a good point. That's just par for the course. You get involved with the pitcher, you just accept that it's probably going to happen at some point. You have to be comfortable with that. So I don't think it's the driver. I don't think it's the driving force behind not wanting to take a high school pitcher, specifically a right-hand pitcher.
It's been so much, and for the last 7 or so years that I've been locked into the draft from the prep side. I do so much with these high school guys, following them from their freshman year on through. Hey, these are really talented arms. High school right-hander, 25 through 40. That's where they're at. It just feels like this is the safe area where I feel comfortable enough to take a risk at this guy, whether it's not in the first round. Hey, that's our second pick. And the supplemental, hey, go find those arms. Go find those high school arms in the supplemental second round. Is that because you just feel the risk factor is less because, hey, we already got our first pick. Let's take that safe guy here, and then we'll see what we get.
So when you're talking about drafting from different ponds, are we going to draft a bat? Are we going to draft a prep bat? Are we going to draft a college arm or a prep arm? Are we going to take a left-hander or a right-hander? Today we're talking about prep right-handed pitchers.
Yes.
But to your point, part of the reason why they do fall is when you look at the breakdown of a draft, look at the market each year, the market tends to ebb and flow. Sometimes there's more of this and more of that. But the one thing people try to do is they try to get bats early. I don't think that that's a secret. So that in and of itself is going to push down a prep right-hander. The question, though, is even when you get into the comp round, second round, third round, there's still a lot of pressure on a scouting director, on an organization not to take the prep right-hander. And I think there's this combination of things that as much as we have specialty scouts out there now, every team, the Yankees started this years ago, which I thought was a good decision, to have very specific scouts, in this case pitching, that should be able to isolate the attributes that are impactful and give you the best opportunity to get a legitimate starting pitcher in the major leagues. I think teams have it, but I don't think they're all readily willing to act on it. So there's still that pressure, even when you have this information and you have the resources, teams are still a little bit unwilling. Not all teams. The Pirates for years have taken prep arms, and they've done well with guys like Mitch Keller, right? They take Mitch Keller, the guy that's closing for the Yankees now, Clay Holmes. They spent money on Clay. I saw Clay in Alabama. Super small town, not polished by any means. The Pirates did it. The Pirates take Mitch Keller from Iowa, I believe. We watched a game last night on TV. Who'd the Pirates take? Jared Jones in 2020. So the Pirates are a team that have been willing to do it. They're there. The players are there. The Twins took Berrios at 30 or 31 overall. Mariners take Edwin Diaz, Puerto Rico. You take a Puerto Rican arm, you don't have as much information on those players, and those players have succeeded in that second group. So if they have the ability to isolate the things that are really, really important, and they have an opportunity to stand by their convictions in the work that they've done, there's a real opportunity in that second part of day one, that comp to second round, to really get a bona fide, really good pitcher. But teams are unwilling to do it.
Now shift over to the scouting aspect. So, hey, just basically, this is the high school guy. I know I go, how well does he move down the mound? How athletic is he? How well does the arm move? What's the flexion look like? The extension, is there more velocity in the tank? Is he trying to overpower the fastball? What do the secondary pitches look like? Does he have that aptitude for spin? Those are all things like when I'm out there constantly going through my head. Confidence level. What is his mound presence like? What is that something that you're looking at? What is the scouting community saying? Yes, this is a right-hander that will succeed. I mean, you said Jared Jones. That kid was as confident as could get, two-way guy, through really hard throughout his entire high school career. What is it you're looking at?
So let's talk about one thing specifically, because this can go in a ton of different directions here. You ask a really good question, and you touch on a lot of really, really good topics. Let's talk about the fastball. Let's keep it very, very simple. If I said to you, we're just going to take high school right-handed pitching in the comp round to the third round, what would be your model? Where would you start? Let's talk about the fastball. The velocity, which we know is extremely important. The fastball movement, which we believe is important. The ability to miss bats with your heater. And then the command. The most difficult thing to project, as much as you and I and other people would love the guy that's going to command the baseball, it's very hard to really isolate exactly what his command is going to be. We do have technology, and we have some things that we can utilize. But when you're dealing with a prep right-handed pitcher, we're seeing him in short stints. We're seeing him in showcase environments. So I'm going to make the assumption that we get by the delivery and the arm action, and all of the players have checked that box where we're like, yep, we're good. Arm action's fine. Delivery's fine.
Yeah,
we're good. Athleticism, we're fine there. Let's talk about the pitch package. The fastball becomes very, very, very important. The velocity and the movement. In 2020, I could discuss two different prep right-handed pitchers that went in the same area. One of them had very little business being drafted in that area, but the team that took them leaned just right into the velocity, and it's fallen apart quickly. They clearly didn't value some of these movement profiles that other teams. So teams are utilizing different tools, and they're believing in their convictions when they look at some of the fastball qualities of these teams of these prospects.
The fastball asset, and I'm thinking of more some recent stuff that I've seen, the package of it, and when I'm in person seeing, hey, how much contact does he get in misses in the zone on the fastball, especially at a high school level, even beyond just the raw velocity, which, shoot, if you're an 18-year-old going up against 15 and 16-year-olds, you should just almost be able to bully them. Even with a bad profile. Yeah, fastball's not great, which is why you have to kind of get beyond that. Like, you should be able to do it. It almost sets off an alarm. Hey, why is he not getting this? Although, guys who are just cheating, trying to put the ball in play and trying to survive the at bat and get the bat on the ball and then just get out of there. That's another factor. Is there a chance for a high school guy to change his fastball profile?
Not remarkably.
Okay.
That's my estimation. I have not had any personal experience with that. Can they move it a little bit? Sure. I think they can probably move it a little bit. But from the scouting, we're scouts, we're evaluators.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm placing my bets and I'm throwing my dart, I'm not going to make that bet. It would be an isolated situation where I would make that bet, particularly because a lot of the players understand this concept right now. And that's what they're working towards behind the scenes with their private pitching coaches. And if they haven't been able to do it, it makes it really, we have good pitching coaches in professional baseball. I would not argue that. There's a lot of really good coaches out there, but there's also good coaches at these facilities. So if a player in this environment hasn't been able to do it, knowing that it's important, that's very, very difficult for me to get over that hurdle. To your point on swing and miss, as simple as it sounds, sometimes that's enough. Just watching and charting and making sure that the scouts in the field are hyper aware of how much swing and miss a particular pitcher is getting on his heater. So if nothing else, as a director, as a cross-checker, you can ask that question, hey, we've seen this player here, 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 and here. Is the swing and miss north of 20%? The guy's throwing 94 against, to your point, on bullying 15, 16, 7. He should just be able to throw it by them even without a great vert. Is he doing that? At the very least, that's a conversation point.
For me, different areas of the country are different, right? If you're playing in the Trinity League in Southern California and maybe not striking out 18 guys a game, well, if you are, that's saying something special about you, versus you're playing in a cold North Jersey 3A area where you're striking everybody out. Those kind of get valued differently, at least for me when I'm heading around the country. Who are you playing against? Is this a real league, or should you be able to really punch out a ton of these guys? Like I said, if you're playing a school with a ton of freshmen and sophomores on it, and they're not all D1 talents, maybe no college guys, why aren't you striking out 12 in 6 innings? That should just happen.
Yeah, there's a common sense part to this. You walk in, now we're talking about high level high school arms. I'm not talking about a projection arm that we're taking in the 5th round, the 8th round, that kind of stuff. I'm talking about high dollar, you're going to make major investments. Very, very rarely should you walk into the ballpark and he doesn't just dominate. I don't think we need to know, we don't need to define what dominate means. But that's what should be going on when you're going to invest a lot of money in a high school arm. I shouldn't call you up after you go to the park and he wasn't good. He hit a lot of bats, and like, that just doesn't happen too often. It shouldn't. There's a real commonsensical part of this as well.
It's amazing how that works. Like, I don't see much of this. This guy is 6'6", throws 98, has 4 pitches, and I'm dinging him for something here. Like, hey, there's just not a lot of this. He's got something special we can't teach. Even more than, let's move over from the fastball to the secondary stuff. I'm a huge believer. Spin wins. What type of breaking stuff can this guy do? The velo will come. Velo we can teach. Everybody has a velo program. Heavy balls. We're moving all over the place. What finger placement can you work with? What can you do to progress a breaking ball? Can you progress a breaking ball? Can you develop a plus pitch out of nothing? Or are you looking for the makings of, hey, this guy has something that we can make even better?
That's a good question. Specifically, can you take nothing, to use your words, and turning into a plus pitch? That's a leap of faith. I'm not going to sit here and speak in absolutes when we're talking about scouting and say it can't happen, but we're in the business of placing bets. So most of the time, especially we're talking about high-level arms, if a young high-level arm has not developed, if he can't even show you an average breaking ball, and we can utilize spin rates and some different things to measure it, or just our eyes and our radar guns and what our, that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to look like Jackson Jobs, right?
Yep.
Maybe it can be a little bit more like, over the last few, we brought up Jared Kelly earlier, or not Jared Kelly. Sorry, Jared Jones last night. Yeah, even if it's not consistent, you want him to show you the ability to do it. Now we can talk about gaining consistency. So you might take a pitcher that has a 40 breaking ball and make it a 50, or maybe a 50-55 and it turns into a 60. But very rarely are you going to turn in a scouting report and say it's a 40, it's going to be a 60. That's a pretty big gap to fill for a pitching coach. So long as you know what a 40 is and you know what a 60 is, So,
good to great. Good to great.
Good. Yes, I like it. Good to great, not bad to great.
I really am a big believer in that good to great. Like, don't spend so much time on getting something not great to average. Let's take this good thing and make it explosive. Let's get it even higher. What do we have the makings of here? To go back to the fastball, we got an explosive fastball. Can we get something to accompany that so that he can play off of those two things? Oh, we have this breaking ball. Well, you know what? That brings up another question: is there kind of a threshold of you need to hit here to start being looked at as a day one now right-handed arm talent? Can the guy who's 92 in the spring of his senior year, but he's got great secondary, moves really well, we think it's going to come that jump? Is it important that you see that jump so that you can give him his 7 figures?
Well, the Braves did it a few years ago with Owen Murphy. They took a guy that was, and I see, I watch Twitter and I see all these like tweets and the Instagrams and all that kind of stuff. Owen Murphy was not a high school right-handed pitcher that was pitching at 94. That's not, when you go in to watch Owen Murphy, you didn't go in and say, wow, he's 4-6 and he's pitching at 4 and 5. And no, you didn't say that. You said average fastball 92, touches a 4 or 5 once in a while. But you didn't think he was going to show up with a really big time heater. What you thought he was going to show up with were strikes and enough fastball and pitchability and missed qualities to his fastball. So when you're in that part of the draft, I know they stepped up and they took 3 guys that year, but when you're talking about high school right-handed pitching, back of the first round into the 3rd round, and you just asked me a secondary question, outside of the fastball, and you look at the player just like holistically, if he doesn't have a breaking ball, and by doesn't, I'm talking it's 40, it's still kind of good for a high school guy, 45, 50 breaking ball. You certainly want to have him showing up with strikes and a fastball.
Okay.
And if he doesn't have quite the fastball, you want him to have really good fastball movement and command with a breaking ball. You want to get these combinations of things, because thinking that a player is going to show up with all of the boxes checked is unrealistic. That just doesn't really exist. So making sure that he has 2 or 3 of those things is really, really important. So you can, if he doesn't have the breaking ball, you can give a little bit and like him for all these other things. When multiple pieces start are missing, you're putting so much stress. You're asking player development to do a serious heavy lift. And if you ask them before the draft, of course they're going to say, yeah, we can fix this or fix that. That's their job. But the reality is making all those fixes is not the best bet when you're in that part of the draft.
Good players make good coaches. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Let me shift over to last year's draft, because there's always right-handed arms, right? Everybody's now in the high school. You're hitting 94. I swear I've never seen so many kids hit 95 and 96. High school kids, it's honestly remarkable just how quickly this is coming. All these arms throughout the spring. This guy's healing. I'm hearing a lot of buzz on this guy. This guy, oh man, they're talking about him in the 2nd or 3rd round. When we look back to last year, 2023, and you took one of these guys, 11 players made 7 figures. So 11 right-handed arms were 7-figure signing bonus guys, and a 12th Barrett Kent was at 997. So I guess essentially he got $1 million. So let's say 12. It was not 50. It was not 100. Of all the names that come through, it was 12. So that's something to take account for. Now, a bunch of those guys will go off to college. There'll be future first rounders, probably 4 or 5 of those at least, coming out in the next 3 years from that freshman class. But there's still value in it. And how do you, once you get past that first round threshold, let's kind of go to your chart to talk about. If you want to introduce some of your chart stuff on the value in a prep right-hander and how it goes from the early rounds to the later rounds, where do you find the best value? Can you introduce that to us?
Yeah, I can. One thing I want to add here is people need to understand sometimes the expectations are really unrealistic. Until people really dive into draft data and understand what the realities are, it's really easy to romanticize and to believe this player can be that and this player can be that. So I would ask the rhetorical question is, how many 2-WAR players do you think you're going to get out of a draft from the prep class? How many players do you need to draft and target? How many players need to be in your target pool to potentially acquire one of the 2-WAR arms? And the reality is there's only 2 to 3 in any given year that are going to be a 2-WAR player in any given year. And so for people listening, a 2-WAR player is a pretty good pitcher. He's a guy that's going to start. He's not going to be a number 5. He's probably going to run between a number 3 and a number 4 starter. I'm not asking for Justin Verlander or
Greinke.
I'm not asking for that, or Aaron Nola, who came out of LSU. I'm not asking for that quality of pitcher. It's a whole level below that. So even the level below, we're only talking about 2 in an entire draft class.
Whew.
So how many do you need to target to feel comfortable that you can say, all right, from that group of 5, from that group of 10, we think one of those 2 are in there. So that's that list that you came up with of the players that were given a bunch of money. Clearly the teams thought, not that they're going to be right, but clearly teams thought that from that group, that was the group that, is it Noble Meyer? Is it, would you say Barrett Kent? Is it, who's another one from last year?
Steven Echeverria, Blake Walter.
Is it Knopf? Is it Knopf had good qualities to his fastball and everything, right? But you have to draft. I had a scout a long time ago. Don't try to just pick the needle out of the haystack. You asked me, I'm going to introduce a concept here. We took Thomas White as well last year, the Marlins. If you're going to get involved with a certain archetype of player, do it. The Pirates have clearly done it. They're not afraid to do it. And they've had some success with that. If you try to take a needle out of a haystack once every 3 or 4 years, man, you're really reducing your odds there. So to get one of those 2 or 3 2-WAR players, you got to be willing to take a few of them, because you're usually not going to be good enough. And a lot of factors are going to come in. They're going to impact that player's career. So
usually with arms, for me, it's always try to build in quantity. I've talked this. Some people were grab the quantity, try to get something out of it. The prep right-handers, the running back of the draft. We'll just grab a bunch of these guys. What Napoleon said, that quantity has a quality unto its own. So grab a bunch of these guys. Hopefully one works out. But there are still guys, outliers, who do come out of this. And it seems like when you take a right-hander early and you look at Jackson Jobe, even Noble from last year, nobody else likes it as much as that guy. Ooh, you guys went with that? Well, everybody else scouted it. He was really good, but it's because you had it. We'll see how that works out for them. But each year, the next team takes that guy thinking, yeah, this is our guy. Everybody else says, ooh, they took the prep right-hander, and then they go on to the next year. But it's perpetual, and it just continues to go outside of the 2 teams, which I should probably guess these 2 teams that you were talking about at the top of the show at some point. But what say you about that? Like, how do you get that value? It's like, we want to get this starter. We want to build this guy. How good is our player development? Or do we feel comfortable in the fact that he's going to get better?
That's a great point. That's a real point, what you just said. Nothing is more important in 2024 than the synergies that need to exist between player development and scouting. Often, you and I have talked about this, the amount of information and data that we have, we often apply just to the scouting community, just to the pickers, the people that are going to select the players. When in reality, it's the player development departments that can utilize all of this information. So if you're a part of the shipping department, which is what we are, the scouts are part of the shipping department, and player development is receiving. If receiving is not using the information, it puts a lot more pressure on the scouting department to thread the needle and to have the confidence to pick one of those players that already exist in a very, very muddy waters. So we need to make sure that both player development and scouting understand what we're picking and whether that's a realistic lift for player development. If those synergies don't exist, it makes it very, very difficult. And therefore, to your point a second ago, there are some teams that just don't get involved. They just don't want to do it because ultimately the scouting departments are held accountable for what they pick. And they want to have the confidence that the players they pick are going to make it to the big leagues in some capacity.
Yeah.
Here, let's throw up that chart that we were talking about, that we were working on for high school right-handed pitchers. I think it's pretty interesting. I think the real question here is, when you're talking about high school right-handed pitching, is it buyer beware or is it buyer be careful? What's the better avenue to go?
It seems like the earlier on, you kind of want to go after it. Like if you have a gut feel, you have a chance, it's going to be more successful early. Is that how I'm reading it here? Earlier on in the draft. So like we see a lot of right-handers potentially the 10 to 20 range or early day two. But looking at the draft, it's, hey, those guys in the first round are the ones who succeed at kind of a higher rate to the larger WAR scale. Is that how I'm reading this?
I think that's absolutely true. Whether you're a prep right-handed pitcher or you're a collegiate right-handed pitcher, one of the things that's just really well known is that the best players, the best WAR players, are going to come out of the first round.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes for a lot of the different positions, not just right-handed pitching. But what's interesting is that teams tend to lean into the floor, of course, in the first round. And I think that tends to, they carry that idea with them as they go further into the draft, and they say, well, we can also get one later on. When in reality, if you're still trying to reach for 1.5, 2+ WAR players, what you see is that the college guys actually underperform that. So yeah, you'll still get a little bit more floor, as you see in chart number 2, but your odds of getting a legitimate 2 WAR player like a Dallas Keuchel or a Jordan Montgomery, yeah, I can cherry pick a lot of players over years. But when you look over this specific subset of 6 years, it's interesting that the teams that do the best with high school pitching, they're reaching into an area that actually produces really good major league players. Part of that 27%, that's where Jared Jones came from.
Yeah. Huh.
You know, that's where Jose Barrios comes from. That's where Edwin Diaz comes from.
So I'm looking at the second chart here, the 2+ WAR, college right-handers, super low. Once you get after the Comp A round 3, so round 4+, I'm seeing 4% on the college right-hander, and then is it 23% on the high school guy?
And I think a lot of that has to, don't forget that once you get beyond the 4th round, teams start acquiring these college right-handers in bulk. I don't have the raw numbers up here, but they're massive amounts of college right-handers that are taken. That's why the percentage is so low. But interestingly enough, the takeaway for me is that if you're a team that can actually line up 30 or 40 high school right-handed pitchers in the country, and you can stay true to the signability, you have a real opportunity throughout the draft to get a pretty good player. But you have to stay very disciplined to the signability. You can't take a player 5th round or 6th round that you have valued there and give him $2.5 million. But if he's willing to pay for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 to use today's terms, today's dollar amounts, that's where the real opportunity exists to get a 2 WAR player. Because the college guys, as much as we like to have the certainty over 3 or 4 years of college, what we also know is what they can't do.
Yeah.
Taking a college reliever in the 4th round, the 5th round, that you think you're just going to turn into a starter. Now, they could have done that at Vandy, LSU, Duke, USC, UCLA, and they didn't do it. So there's a lot of things that you know as well. So the point is, if you have the confidence in your pitching scouts and your development, there is opportunity throughout the draft to acquire high WAR players out of the pitching group. I just don't think a lot of teams have that confidence yet.
Well, and especially if you start you're eliminating at least two teams. They're not involved in this. Now, hey, we got an even greater chance of grabbing these guys. We know these guys are going to be scared. These guys are going to be scared. Well, if we do line it up, like you said, in the correct order, we have a chance to really attack some stuff. Looking at these numbers, diving in, shoot, are some of these college right-handers in the 4 through 10, are they just filling a roster so that these other guys can play? Is that where we're at?
That is where we're at. And it doesn't feel that way when you make the pick. There's a misconception here. And that's why one of the things that I've advocated for a while, I learned this a long time ago. When you sit in a draft room and you're in the 5th round, the 6th round, the 7th round, and I would ask you, looking at this information, and a scout starts telling you that this guy's a starter and we're in the 6th round, what are you going to tell him? He's a college guy and he's going to be a starter in the big leagues. That's a hard lift. That's a big lift to think that, because that's just not true. Conversely, you might say, look at the attributes of this player. Look at the qualities that he brings to the table. I think we're getting major league value. You can talk in those terms, but to say confidently, I think this guy's a major league starter, and that's a big statement, because not all teams do that. So really trying to understand what the college pitchers that have already cleared the college hurdle and they're going to go off into pro ball, and now they're in the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, and the 8th round. That doesn't mean that we're not going to run them out as starters. But when we look at the outcomes of these players, to your point, no, you're not going to get major league starters out in that area. You should be really happy pulling a really good college reliever off the board, where he starts for a few years in college, or he starts for a few years in professional baseball. You develop some things that need to be developed, but ultimately, we know where he's going to end up. Just like Dylan Floro. Dylan Floro was a really good pitcher coming out of college. He ends up as a nice middle reliever, maybe a setup guy for a minute in the big leagues. And that's a heck of a pick for a team. But to classify players and to pigeonhole players and to make selections based on the fact that you think you're going to nail the role on a college pitcher in the 8th round and call him a starter, that's really difficult to do, because the data just doesn't suggest that.
We all love to romanticize it, though. We're going to get that one guy, and it doesn't. I would think that it doesn't mean that the scouting department doesn't believe in the pick, right? Like you were saying, like, hey, we're sending up each year. We believe this is going to be our guy. This is going to be Spencer Strider. We are hitting right here on Spencer Strider. We're going to develop. What was he, a 4th rounder? That was a little bit of a weird year, but grabbing this 4th rounder who's going to become Cy Young. This 5th rounder is going to be Cy Young. This is Jacob deGrom, who we're going to turn from a shortstop into the best pitcher in the world.
Yeah, you have to understand the expectation here. When you get into this 4th to the 10th round and you're dealing with right-handed pitchers, specifically college guys, be really happy and be excited if you can walk into a draft room and just say, this is a major league player. This guy's going to pitch in the major leagues. That should be enough to pull the magnet. Now, who are those players? The vast majority of the time, they were the pitcher at the University of Nebraska. They were the pitcher at Texas A&M or at LSU or at Wright State, and so on and so forth. They were a starting pitcher. But because of where we are in the draft, just be excited that you have the conviction based on the attributes of the player that you can just say, sure, write it down, this guy will pitch in the major leagues. I'm not going to try to pigeonhole his role, because that's just too difficult to do. So teams that can acquire as many of those players as possible get really excited. What we're going to talk about going down the road in future episodes is, well, taking a position player versus one of these college pitchers that we know are going to be relievers. That is where a more interesting and dynamic conversation happens. But for the sake of a right-hander versus a right-hander, this is the information. This is what it is.
Now, stay with me with my remedial. Come down to my level, my remedial brain, looking at the chart, going back to it, because the first chart is just guys who made the MLB, right? So round 1, college right-hander, 89%. So these guys were if you're a first rounder coming out of college, you're kind of ready, especially as you start looking in future episodes, the more recent development aspect of it, 89%, high school 61%. Hopping over to the 2+ WAR, like we were talking about, hey, the high school right-hander's 29%. The college guy's only 21.
Mm-hmm.
Is should more teams be doing this? Should more teams see the value in, hey, let's take this chance here, the scared money don't make money type of situation. Let's grab this guy. We think he has a chance. Let's scout him heavy. And then in a second after you speak about this, I want to shift over to this year's draft where we think there's some major value outside of the first round. What does that mean?
Let me share you with something where I've really changed as an evaluator over my 20 years. Years ago, I used to believe that if you were comparing two players that were very, very equal, you would just take the college guy over the high school guy. Why wouldn't you? He's older, he's answered questions. You think he might get to the big leagues quicker. But in recent years, I've grown beyond that. And I started to ask myself the question, once the player has cleared a hurdle and gotten into the same lane as the college player, let's not talk about high school or college, because you've already allowed that player for talent purposes to get into that lane. So stop talking about college versus high school. And what we see right here in that first column that you're addressing is if the scouting director, the evaluator, the decision maker, could be an assistant GM. You go in these draft rooms, it's not the scouting director always pulling the card. There's a lot of other voices and influences in there. So whoever's impactful in the decision decides to take a college guy, could be an owner, college player over a high school player. Let's be very, very clear. That's not a distinguishing feature in becoming a 2-WAR player, high school versus college, because they're equal talent. You've already decided, shooter, that they're equal talent. So let's talk about apples and apples. What makes that player better? I've changed significantly over the years in that belief. So I do think that an organization, once they allow the right-hander into the same lane, and I would say this applies to a lot of different positions, but once they allow that right-handed pitcher, Noble Meyer, Lucas Giolito, maybe a Jose Barrios we referred to, or a Jared Jones, once you've allowed that high school pitcher into lane number 1 or lane number 2, the comp A to the 3rd round, you really need to think twice before you take a college guy for the simple fact that he is a college player. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I spoke right recently on that chart too about the round 1 guys, but that comp to round 3 is probably the most staggering, which is honestly the reason why we probably talk about pick 30 to 50. That's the high school right-hander's lane. Well, statistically speaking, that's a pretty big lane that he's got to have a chance of success over that college guy as a 2+ WAR. And if
you talked about this year's draft. Let's talk about this year's draft in the context of all these other drafts. And I've had these conversations before. As an organization, you need to really focus on that every given draft. Some years the market's better than others. You looking at this graph, you better be really focused, hyper-focused on that second tier of pitching. Because the first tier of pitching, which is lane number 1, in any given draft, there's only going to be 3 or 4 guys that you're even thinking about for that lane this year. Who are those players, shooter? You know who they are for this year.
This year, you're looking at Will Schmidt,
Sure.
Ryan Sloan for me, although the fastball has had a little bit of issues. It's really only William Schmidt right now because in a second we'll talk about that next level.
Sure. So what we find though, going into the next group, if you were to pass on Schmidt for whatever reason, you like a shortstop more, or you like a catcher more, whatever the case might be, and you decide we're not going to take a high school right-handed pitcher with our first pick, what's the draft offering us this year, and how important is it that we pay attention here to the second lane of comp to round 3, and who are those names that might arrive, and what are the characteristics of those players that might have the opportunity to pass these college players. And history is showing us they can pass those college players if you do what the Pirates did, and you take Jared Jones or you take Mitch Keller, those kind of players.
I'm listening to you here and just looking at the chart and the data sets for this, supplemental through three, and all of a sudden, all these high school right-handers are becoming ultra valuable. Where it's like, oh, the high school. Now I'm buying in even more. Now I need to get second looks. Now I need to go in there for a guy, Tegan Kuhn's a PA guy, Trey Gregory Alford, Joey Oki, who's in Iowa, electric stuff. Hey, we're taking him here. There may be huge value in a guy like that. Connor Gatwood up to 100 has had some injuries slowing things down, but the frame's there. Maybe his value gets hit a little bit because of those injuries throughout the spring, but we can probably get something out of that. Braden Krenzel was off kind of a slower start, but it was great all summer, had a great showing at our All-American game. Chase Mobley in Florida, kind of a down year in Florida a little bit, but he's up triple digits. Is he a reliever? Can he start? Levi Sterling, kind of a slow start for him, but he's one of the younger guys in this draft. And then even some explosive pop-up guys like Chris Lavonis, New Jersey kid, explosive at the Super 60 back in February. He's off to a good start this spring. Braylon Doty, Southern California guy who I think will probably go in this range. If we're really talking truthfully about it, Braylon Doty is a big-time name that you're starting to talk about. Can we get 2+ WAR for this guy in the supplemental or second round?
So I wasn't keeping track, but in any given draft, any market, the pockets of players are different. Last year, we didn't get to have this conversation. Last year, the conversation was about what? Oh, the high school shortstop, the athletes in the middle of the field. Same exact thing happened in 2021. You had Brady House and Khalil Watson, and you had Colson Montgomery and Lawler, and it was just this year's draft is very different than those drafts. The Jackson Jobs and the Painters and the Noble Myers don't really. It's harder to make that comp this year in this year's particular draft. But where this draft beats those drafts is that huge list of players that you just showed. So it's up to the teams to really consider what it is about those players that makes them look like the players that have had 2-WAR success in previous years. And that's an intentional effort. If you're a pitching cross-checker out there, that's a critical role. Is there a more critical role in a scouting department in this particular year than that role so that you as a team can take advantage of this market? From my estimation, I never had the luxury of that, having a pitching cross-checker. I had some really good scouts on my staff, but I didn't have that luxury. In this year's draft, it's a market to be taken advantage of because there's a lot of really good opportunity out there with the names that you just said. You mentioned Braylon Doty, might be one of the hottest names in the market right now.
Oh, yeah. Now, what about, because there's so much value to be had here, can you drive down the cost? So, like, from a team like, oh, this guy wants this, we can just get 2 of those for that one. Is that something in a draft room where you're saying, how many of these guys can we get? How many picks? I guess you really are dependent on how many picks do we have here? What's our pool? But can we get 2 instead of that one? How much higher is this one guy ahead of these other 2 that we can get for the same price?
Yes, and yes, and yes. And no, if you don't have picks. But you have to have, if you've got the luxury to have extra picks, which is a strategic thing that organizations do. It's a big picture item or big picture things that teams do to make sure they get enough pool money. And that doesn't mean just finishing low in the standings.
Yeah.
The D-backs have a really nice draft pool. If memory serves me right,
they've done a great job.
They might be $10 to $12 million, and you wouldn't suggest that they should have that pool this year. But because of some of the decisions that they've made at a much higher level, they've been able to acquire more money. So that's number one, if you have the draft pool. Number 2, I think you bring up a really good point. This happens in the international market a lot. Once you've isolated those 4 or 5 pitchers that you would like to select, the ability to get 2 of them would be great.
Yeah.
Because you're getting more bites at the apple, right? You're getting more bites at the proverbial apple. You're rolling the dice a few more times because to pick the needle out of the haystack is extremely difficult. You've got to dive into the deep end of the pool and roll the dice as many times as you can. So if you have the budget to do it, and your scouts, the area scouts are critical in this.
Oh, huge year for them.
In the signability, understanding what this player wants to do can be invaluable to your organization. Invaluable. Having been in that situation, having fulfilled the role of area scout, regional scout, national cross checker, scouting director, I'm more convinced than ever that that type of information is critical as it moves up the food chain, and the area scout can have immense value in this process.
So I'm super curious. I'm going to ask about that situation, because for some of these guys, it's going to be a day 2 process, or even, hey, we just cut the break after round 1. Here's what's left on the board. You're crossing out, hey, no high school arms went. What do we have here? What's the signability? How quick is that information running around? How vital is it that the agent has multiple phones so that he can answer a call from the Phillies and the Blue Jays and the Rockies and the whoever it may be? Mm-hmm. How quick are those things moving on draft day for you to be able to move your draft board around, algorithm, eliminate guys?
So they're moving really, really fast on draft day, but the teams that are prepared, they know how to slow that down.
Okay. And what does slowing it down look like?
Slowing it down means you're very, very intentional about how you acquire your information prior to the draft. This is still a relationship business. Make no mistake about this. It is a relationship business. It's the relationship that the team has with the player. It's the relationship that the player has with the scout, the relationship that the scouts and the organizations have with the people around the player that can make all the difference in the signability, because if you call for signability and you just get a one-way street with you and the agent, what do you think the agent's going to say?
Yeah, he's going to sign.
So as an organization, it's absolutely critical that you understand, and this is important, signability isn't always the number that's being conveyed to you. Major mistakes can be made. You just assume that the signability is the number that you're hearing out of the player, the agent, or people around him. It's typically the situation. The situation and the circumstance, and knowing what that is, can significantly outweigh what the number is.
The baseball draft is so fascinating. It is so fascinating. It's got to be so stressful in the room how quick things move versus we got the NFL drafts coming up. We select this guy, talent. Here's his slot. This is what he's getting. It just kind of moves like that versus this player has a lot more control than they do in the NFL, in the NBA. Right? Absolutely. We're still talking about Eli Manning forcing his way to New York. It's just like that's either not happening or it's happening every year at the high school level. I'm going to go to college, or I'm going to go to JUCO, or I'm going to go do this. I'm looking even more at like last year's, and Noble at the top, who $4.5 million. Echeverria, who was kind of a pop-out guy, Jersey, not pop-up, but younger for the class, $3 million. The grouping steadily moved down. Now there's a group of 1, 2, 3, 4 guys who get between 2 and 3 million. And then it goes down 1, 2, 3 guys that get 1.5 to 2. Yep. And it's amazing where you situate yourself signability wise, where you can go. And I've always kind of, I guess it's just talking with people, being around, seeing where guys are. That $2 million threshold, I think when I was in high school, was more a 1 million. Like life-changing money, I need to clear $1 million or whatever it may be. Now it seems to bump up to 2. The elite, the upper echelon guys are 2.5 to 3. But if you really look at like, oh, this guy's asking for 4 million. Well, you're looking at one prep right-hander. That's the only spot. You're not in this mix. You get crossed out. We move down to who's here willing to take essentially 1 to 1.7. Who's willing to take 1 to 1.7? That's the group that we're working with. At least that's how I've seen it in annotating the list.
You know, when we talk about relationship shooter, the agents, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. There's some really good advisors out there. They can play a critical role in this entire process. And the relationships that the organizations have with those advisors becomes really, really critical. If an advisor receives a phone call from an organization and they don't have any relationship with that person, not the organization, but if that advisor doesn't have any relationship with the person, it's very difficult if I had to put myself in his shoes, to trust the person on the other end of the phone. So these
Oh yeah.
relationships are super, super important here to make sure that these deals get done, because the signability changes in real time. And the info, where's the kid going to school? Who are the influences around him? What's the education system like? Or how involved in education is the player? It's a lot of different things that can impact this signability that don't have as much to do with money. Money's just the end game. So the relationships that you have are absolutely critical. And it's, you mentioned the player a second ago. We're at the MLB Combine. The player does have a role in this process. Maybe not to the extreme of your example of Eli Manning. If I'm a player, if I'm a parent, I'm coming to that MLB Combine prepared to ask real questions to teams so that I can have a conversation with the people that are going to impact my career, my advisor, maybe my coach, and talk about the types of information we want to release to certain teams. That would be really important. If I had a young son that was a right-handed high school pitcher, I would want to know that stuff, and I'd come prepared to the combine.
I'm with you. I think there's some great agents out there that come prepared, have this type of data where, and I think the best thing they can do for their client is to give them an honest evaluation. This is where the industry sees you. This is what you're looking at. This is who you're up against, which a lot is what we're doing is here are the right-handers. This is how we have them order. We'll have a draft board coming out soon, but this is where they're at. And you put them into this box and look at it and, hey, is this where you want to go? Is this not? I also value being truthful with that stuff because it is a job for those area guys who then go uphill. I think this is going to be a huge draft 2024 for area scouts just because there is so much talent and depth in the pitching class. Probably outside of the round one when looking at these names. Again, move back to your chart 2 there. That second tier, that comp round through 3, I think there's some dudes this year that we will be talking about. What's the year you're saying we'll be talking about them?
Oh, I think I went on record and said, we'll find out how good the prep pitching class is this year in 2027. Is my math right?
You know what's funny is 2027 used to be 20 years away, and it's not anymore.
Right. It's 2027. We'll see how good this prep class was. I want to end with something that we were talking about. Of course, I can't recall it right now, but it'll come to me when we're off the air. Maybe we'll put it back out there. But I've enjoyed the conversation. I think the prep right-handers are really interesting. I think that teams have a wonderful opportunity this year to take some really, really good. If you're looking to impact the pitching in your system with young 17, 18, 19-year-old talent, this could be a great opportunity for the right organization.
Well, there's going to be at least 2 teams calling us both morons. I'm sure there's going to be many who are saying these guys don't know what they're talking about. But this was awesome. Prep right-handers, hot button ticket. Svihlik and Shooter here on the War Room. Please subscribe. However you hear podcasts, YouTube channel, go on there and get it. And we'll be back with you soon. And stay tuned.
Thank you, Shooter.